Okay, so moving on to example 7, in garden peas, tallness is dominant to shortness. So we know we're talking about dominant and recessive, so complete dominance here. And axillary flowers are dominant to terminal flowers. So we're talking about two different traits, how tall something is, and the flower type. Is it axillary or terminal? Because we're talking about two different traits, we know this is going to be a dihybrid cross. So the first thing, like always, you want to write your genotypes out. So I like to write them out, and again, you can do your key however you want as a complete set. So for example, including both of the traits. So I want to take all the possible combinations. I want to see what the genotype of a tall and axillary flower is, a tall and terminal genotype, a short and axillary, and a short and terminal. So now we can write the genotypes out over here. Because tall is dominant to short, we know any tall plant is going to have at least one dominant allele. It doesn't matter what the second allele is in order to be tall, so I'm going to use an underscore like that. Axillary flowers are also dominant to terminal flowers, so we have the same thing going on here. One dominant allele. It doesn't matter if the second allele is dominant or recessive, it will still be axillary, so we do an underscore there. So when you do your dihybrid cross, which produces 16 possible combinations of genotypes in the offspring, this is much easier if you do the underscore to go in to locate basically the percentage of offspring that have this phenotype. So you know when you look at the 16 offspring, all you're looking for is at least one dominant or one capital T and one capital A, and that means that it's going to be tall and axillary. Okay, let's look for tall and terminal, as far as genotype goes. So it's going to have the same thing. Because tall is dominant to short, we know we just need at least one dominant allele. Doesn't matter what the second allele is. It could be a dominant allele or a recessive allele. It would still be tall. However, we're dealing with the terminal flowers now. So because we're dealing with the terminal flowers, it would have to have both recessive alleles, so two lowercase a's. So if we end up with a short and axillary plant, we know short is recessive, so in order to have this phenotype, we need both recessive alleles. And then axillary is going to be dominant to terminal. So same thing we had previously. In order to get axillary flowers, we just need one dominant allele. It doesn't matter what the second allele is at all. Now we're looking for short and terminal. This has only one possible genotype because they're talking about phenotypes that require both recessive alleles. So we need two lowercase t's and two lowercase a's, and essentially all recessive alleles in order to have that phenotype. So you can imagine that one's probably going to be the rarest type of phenotype that you're going to see in the offspring. Okay, so now let's figure out the genotypes of our parents. So the first one is going to be a heterozygous tall, and remember heterozygous means it has one of each of the alleles. So if we're talking about tall, that means it has one dominant, one recessive allele. A heterozygous axillary plant, so it's going to have one dominant and one recessive allele because it says that it's heterozygous. It's crossed with a heterozygous tall, so again heterozygous means one of each allele. Terminal plant, so the only genotype we can have for a terminal plant is two recessive alleles, so that would be the genotypes of the parents. So now we have to make our Punnett square, which is much larger. So before, when we were doing a monohybrid cross, we were taking either of the alleles, because remember, for each allele, for each genotype, we have 2 alleles. So the gamete's only going to receive one of the 2 alleles. So now we got to figure out what are our possible options for the alleles if we're talking about 2 different traits. But now we're talking about 2 different traits, so we need to combine an allele from one of the traits with the other trait. So our first option is for parent number 1, we could have the gamete have one dominant tall allele and one dominant axillary allele. So our first possible combination of alleles donated by the gamete is 2 dominant alleles. The other option is we donate the dominant allele and the recessive allele. In that case, we're going to have dominant and recessive here. So again, you have to figure out all possible combinations for both alleles because they're both going to be in the gamete together. Then we can go in and look at the recessive allele options. So the recessive allele could pair with the dominant axillary allele, or the recessive allele could be paired with the other recessive allele, and this could be in the possible gamete. So we do the same thing to parent too. So we can look at dominant allele, recessive allele, or same thing, we could go with another dominant allele, recessive allele. Then if we're looking at the next allele, which is the recessive allele, it could pair with the recessive allele, and it could also pair with the other recessive allele. Now in this case, we know that this row, because this allele is the same, this genotype is the same as this genotype, all of these would be the same. We could essentially erase this row. These two are the same. We could erase this row and it would give us the same probabilities. However, I'm going to go ahead and write them all out for now. If we do a dihybrid example in the future on this playlist, then and it comes out this way, you'll see me reduce it down just to save time. So then again, we're going to put our possible gametes. We have to take into account that we're getting 2 alleles from each parent, each alleles for a different trait. So you should have 4 alleles in every offspring. So in this case, we get 2 dominant tall ones, a dominant axillary, and a recessive axillary allele. Again, when you're writing these, write them capital letter always goes first. Keep the same trait going first and the same trait going second. Don't start writing A's first and then T's and then some capitals and lowercase. Always write capital first and keep the same trait first. If you wanted to, you could have reversed this and written your flower type first and then put your height second, but I'm just setting it up the way I did. The way I did. Okay, so then we keep filling in our boxes of possible combinations. I know these are all going to be the same here because we're working with the same alleles, so I'm just going to copy it quickly. Okay, so now we're starting with a new genotype here. So let me look at this. Okay, the question is asking what is the expected ratios. You likely will not be asked about the ratios. let's see what the probabilities of getting each one of these types of phenotypes are. So remember, what a dihybrid cross produces is 16 different offspring. So your numbers are going to be out of 16. Okay, so let's start with tall and axillary. All we need in order to have this phenotype is one of the dominant alleles. So I see one dominant allele here, one here, so there's one. One dominant, so this is going to be tall and axillary. One dominant, tall and axillary. One dominant, tall and axillary. Dominant, tall and axillary. Dominant, so it's tall and axillary. And that's it. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 6 with this phenotype, sorry. So now look for tall and terminal. So for tall and terminal, we are looking for at least one dominant allele combined with 2 recessive alleles for the plant, for the flower. So this has dominant alleles and 2 recessive. Whoops. Sorry, guys. So if we're looking at this, we know this is going to be dominant allele, 2 recessive. So this is going to be tall and terminal. Dominant allele, 2 recessive. So this is going to be tall and terminal. Dominant, 2 recessives. So tall and terminal. Dominant, 2 recessives. So tall and terminal. Dominant, 2 recessives, going to be tall and terminal. Dominant, 2 recessives, tall and terminal, and that's it. So again, we produce 6. So now let's look at short and axillary. So short and axillary requires that we have 2 recessive alleles and at least 1 dominant allele for the flower. So I have 2 recessives in all of these, but we need a dominant. So dominant, 2 recessive in both of these, which means that we're going to have short and axillary too. Short and terminal is going to have our final phenotype, which we can see here. So we're also going to have 2 of those. Okay, so remember this is out of 16. So when you see your answers, if for example you're asked what is the probability from this parental cross that we just did of getting a short and terminal plant, well, your choices, for example, would be 2 out of 16. You are not going to see 2 out of 16 on your exam. You're going to see it reduced down to 1/8. Okay, so it's the same thing as saying 1/8. And this would be 1/8. Same thing when we do tall and axillary, tall and terminal, we produce 6 out of 16. That reduces down to 3/8. So those are the fractions you would see on the exam here. You would not see these at all. So looking at the reduced down fractions, if I went back in and say, hey, this is the same as that, let's just erase it. This one is the same as this one. Let's just erase it. This would give us our reduced ratios that we just saw here. So if we look at tall and axillary, which we made yellow, we have 3 out of 8. If we look at our tall terminal, we would have 3 out of 8 now. Short and axillary, 1 out of 8. And then short and terminal would be 1 out of 8. So if you want to save some time, if some of your genotypes are the same, you can literally just erase that row and then count how many offspring are left.